So how should we be living? Choosing to not hurt anyone would be a good start. Hi, hello, I'm Phil. I work at Let's Try Again Productions, and welcome to Let's Relook. Basically, we have a friend who sometimes feels lost in life and asks questions about it, so we're answering for a friend. Today, let's relook life. Priorities. We're suggesting approaches to living, not telling anyone how to live. How could we? We're not even sure how to live ourselves. We all have different priorities. The 10 functions as a quick and easy way to see what ours are, if we weren't already aware. They can also help us reevaluate if our priorities are right, if we're prioritizing the most worthwhile things. At the end of the day, even if most of what we do hits multiple categories, no matter how leveraged we may be, we have finite waking hours. Developing one aspect of life will at some point come at the expense of developing another. We have sacrificing physical health for career, that's pretty common. Also not rare, some of us could be prioritizing fun over making money. Alternatively, we have people putting romantic relationship, family, friends before career and money, although that may be harder to find. Sometimes doing what we want isn't the same as doing what we should. I think deep down inside, we can feel it whenever those two things aren't the same. When we know best, it just takes some introspection. All the 10 is meant to do is serve in that process whenever we choose to stay still. What does the 10 say about us? If we dug into Reddit OP's post, we find out that romantic relationships alone was causing her enough grief to find an otherwise fulfilling life unpleasant. True, she didn't need a framework to know the source of her unhappiness. In fact, she was already able to appreciate all that she had going on for her in her life, and that's why she was confused as to why she was still unhappy. However, we may not always be as attuned to both good and bad things happening in our lives. Review. Just for kicks, if anything else, why not inspect how we ourselves are doing in the 10 aspects of our own lives? Let's rate ourselves in each category out of 10 and try quantifying our quality of life as a score out of 100. No one is as self-aware as we think we are, but it's best practice to rate ourselves objectively. So, be as honest with ourselves as possible. While it's harder to be accurate, I think, with an inflated ego as opposed to low self-esteem, at the end of the day, the only person this score matters to is ourselves. So the exercise still somewhat accurately reflects who we judge ourselves to be right now. The first 3 parts measure might as a score out of 30. This score shows how successful we see ourselves. The traditional definition of success is wealth and power, not a fulfilling family life or enjoying hobbies. Success is our material results in how we've changed society around us. Note, it's entirely possible to have a large impact on society without being rich or possessing official authority, though it is fairly uncommon. Parts 4 to 6, the relationship aspects, as a score out of 30. This score shows how wanted we feel. Life is relationships. The rest is just details. Applies here. Let's say we're successful, financially free, improving the lives of many people we don't know. But we have no one else close to share in this joy of this accomplishment. Would that feel a bit empty? It's a genuine question because the answer can be no. I guess the only real way to know is to become successful, burn bridges with friends and or family in the process, and check if it bothers us that we lost them. Because it might not, but we'd have to ask ourselves if we ever cared about anyone to begin with, and what kind of person that makes us. Part 7 and 8 for health, as a score out of 20. This score shows how frequently we think our life is difficult. Running in tip-top physical and mental condition in the long term makes daily living range from feeling light, at best, to neutral, at worst. Even when times get stressful in the midterm, or we run into short-term difficulties, we don't plunge too far into darkness because we're operating on a pretty high level of stability. So give it enough time and things will feel back to all right again. It may sound unfortunate that high scores of physical and mental health only lead to feeling neutral as opposed to great, but with so many victims of depression and anxiety and addiction and so on, all right often gets dismissed as a given when it could be considered a blessing. The soul parts, 9 and 10 as a score out of 20. This score shows how enjoyable we find life. Being in good health only gets us so far to feeling alright, But to feel good consistently, we rely on our habits. Some aren't always good for us, usually unending cycles of consuming things that spike our dopamine. Some are more sustainable, like practices or actions completely unrelated to our career, such as hobbies. However, it's fairly rare to achieve a lasting higher level of baseline happiness just by following our natural likes and interests alone. Higher happiness probably comes with paying more attention to things that are already present in our lives, as opposed to adding non-essentials on a regular basis. To see what is already there in a new light, we'd have to slow down to really notice what we missed or took for granted before. That's probably the first step in a journey to renewed appreciation of what's around us. A lot of development here revolves around improving how comfortable we are with uncertainties ahead that we can't prepare for. This may also be an unending cycle of renewal, but it tends to feel better, more lasting and worthwhile. Don't kid ourselves. Ultimately, it's still about being honest with ourselves. We can totally give ourselves 100 out of 100 if we genuinely feel balanced and satisfied in every way, from the bottom of our heart. Since it wouldn't just be a facade that crumbles easily, no one else's judgment of our perfect perceived reality would really matter. That's why we're happy to show you some references for what filled out decagons could look like, which would be ours. Low scores across the board. In the opposite scenario, some can interpret the 10 as 10 ways to lose at life. Born with disadvantages, in a bad neighborhood, bad genetics, bad family. It's definitely the truth for some of us. The world is currently structured far from ideal. The unfairness in distribution of resources and intense competition, especially among the disadvantaged classes, isn't controversial news. We can't say for sure how truly unfair the world is, but it's not unusual to see people claw their way up at someone else's expense. But the goal is to add value regardless of who we are or how tough life is. Operating in a zero-sum fashion by stepping on someone else means exactly that. No value is added. It's net zero because we basically took value from someone or somewhere else for ourselves. Staying stagnant to avoid hurting others may not be so bad, but it probably doesn't feel very fulfilling. So the only alternative left is being positive sum, to add value to ourselves and or others, but at no one's expense. This may be more difficult, but it's not impossible. Some might say it's unexpectedly easy despite the current unfairness of the world. We wouldn't know any better than that, but we do know that we're not really living well if someone else has to lose for us to gain. Besides, there can be value in actions that cost us nothing by ourselves. This is where we ask, how many of the world's problems could be solved by each of us becoming better people individually? Regardless if the answer is 0 or what our circumstances are, the only thing in the world truly within our control is ourselves. We can't force anyone else to do anything, only persuade them. So here's how things may change. As we grow on our own, we become more likely to convince others, and our effect on the world may increase. We change our circumstances in the same direction of our own progress. If we're becoming better, so will the situation, and vice versa. A better situation in turn enables us to grow even more. It's almost as if what's within our control is enough. Our capabilities, integrity, emotions, responses, we don't need more than that. We can choose how we see things, how little we care about things that may not serve us, and how much we feel like we're winning. Some of our perceived results are verifiable with cold hard facts. For example, we're not going to believe that we're getting wealthier if we're unemployed and we're not doing anything about it. However, a lot of what we get out of life isn't verifiable and remains subjective to us. For example, the feeling of purpose and happiness. There's a lot of room to adjust our outlook on the world around us. Ultimately, if we choose not to develop ourselves in any way, the person who loses out the most is us. Even if we can't add much, anything small is enough of a difference for things to not stay the same. There are 10 ways we could be living right, and 10 causes of misery. So when something's not going well, we can work on the specific problem sooner and maybe even spiral less overall in the future. I'd say that armed with such an awareness, Reddit OP was already a step ahead of us in this. We hope to affect others positively, but if we've had no noticeable effect, at least we hurt no one in the process, so we don't have to worry about the rest. Live well. Here at LTAp, we make content about what it means to live well as a kind of answer to everything. There could be billions of different interpretations to this, since ultimately everybody gets to decide for themselves individually. But if you're interested in our suggestions, you could stick around with us. We have a lot to answer for a friend.